Step into a world where the supernatural meets mystery and where a witty and clever young girl becomes an unlikely hero. Welcome to Spectre, an anime that will captivate you from the very first moment. Meet Kotoko Iwanaga, a young woman with a special gift. She can communicate with spirits and youkai, the creatures of the supernatural world. With her quick wit and sharp intellect, she navigates a world filled with enigmas and uncanny occurrences. But when a terrifying specter known as the Steel Lady begins haunting the city, Kotoko must team up with Kuro Sakuragawa, a young man with a dark secret, to unravel the mystery behind this malevolent entity. Get ready for a thrilling ride filled with suspense, action, and unexpected twists. Don't miss the first recap episode of Spectre. You won't be able to look away. The story unfolds with a young girl named Iwanaga Kotoko, seated on a chair, lost in her thoughts. As the clock strikes a designated time, she gracefully stands up, adjusts her hat, and picks up her trusty walking stick. She approaches a boy named Sakuragawa Kuro-kun, seemingly familiar to her. However, to her surprise, Kuro-kun doesn't recognize her. Perplexed, she wonders how he could forget someone who once saved him. Trying to jog his memory, she reminds him of an incident from 2 years ago when he was at a hospital. As he was about to stumble, she swiftly rushed to his side, using her hand to prevent him from falling. Kuro-kun acknowledges the incident, but remarks that she looks different from the girl who rescued him that day. However, grateful for her heroic act, Kuro expresses his thanks. Kotoko, with a playful smile, makes an intriguing request in return. She asks Kuro never to forget her. He finds this condition somewhat whimsical, considering it was just one instance of her helping him. However, he recognizes that her quick intervention saved him from potential harm, making it a significant and memorable event. Considering the importance she attaches to it, Kuro accepts her request with a nod, and they part ways on a positive note. Later, feeling a bit embarrassed for forgetting her, Kuro-kun apologizes and recalls that when they first met, she wasn't wearing her distinctive hat. Amused, Kotoko wonders if Kuro recognizes people primarily based on their headwear. This reminds Kuro-kun of his ex-girlfriend, Saki-san, who was uncomfortable with him looking at other girls' faces. Unfazed by his statement, Kotoko insists that she is the same girl who saved him. She recalls that on that day, Saki-san had witnessed the rescue and apologized for any trouble caused. At the time, she had no idea that Saki-san was Kuro-kun's girlfriend because Saki-san looked like his older sister. Curious about the situation, Kotoko decides to inquire around the hospital and learns that Kuro-kun frequently visits the hospital to see his cousin, who is a long-term patient. Assuming that the cousin is the girl she saw him with earlier, Kotoko is informed by the nurses that the cousin is actually Saki-san, who is a year older than Kuro-kun. The nurses reveal the story of how they met and their plans to get married after attending the same university. Hearing this news, Kotoko feels disheartened as she had developed feelings for Kuro-kun. One day, when Kotoko notices Kuro-kun sitting alone, she becomes curious and asks the nurses why they think it's been a while since they last saw him with his girlfriend around the hospital. Back in the day, Kuro-kun questions Kotoko why the hospital staff shared his personal information so easily with her. She explains that there's no obligation to protect visitors' information. Kotoko then straightforwardly proposes that Kuro-kun should start a new relationship with her. He finds it odd that a middle schooler would ask him out, but she claims to be 17 and planning to attend the same university as him. Shortly after, Kotoko asks Kuro-kun why Saki-san broke up with him. He reveals that during a trip, they encountered a monster, and when he claimed to have fled, Saki-san broke up with him. However, Kotoko doesn't believe his story and tells him what really happened. She explains that the monster was the one who ran away upon seeing Kuro-kun, which frightened Saki-san, making her wonder about his true identity. Intrigued by Kotoko's insight, Kuro-kun starts to question her background. She then reveals that she is the god of wisdom for all monsters. She further reveals that she is an 11-year-old girl who was kidnapped 6 years ago and found with one leg and one eye, with the monsters taking this as a price for her new role as a goddess of wisdom. Kotoko's affection for Kuro-kun doesn't sit well with the monsters she oversees, as they see her more as a monster than one of them. Later that day, a monster informs Kotoko about an ayakashi, a supernatural creature, in the library. She asks Kuro-kun to help her defeat it, and although he initially resists, he eventually agrees. During their confrontation with the ayakashi, the true reason behind the monster's fear of Kuro-kun is unveiled. The monster bites off Kuro-kun's arm, but surprisingly, the skin of the monster dissolves, leaving only its bones behind, shocking Kotoko. Puzzled by Kuro-kun's mysterious abilities, Kotoko inquires about his true identity. He reveals that at the age of 11, he consumed flesh from two different yokai, supernatural beings, acquiring their powers and becoming something more than human. The next day, Kuro-kun arrives at the hospital to see his cousin, and Kotoko meets him there. Concerned about his arm, she wonders how he gained such regenerative power. He reveals that he acquired the power of regeneration by eating mermaid flesh when he was 11, preventing him from getting hurt. She questions why he has aged, since mermaid flesh is rumored to grant eternal life, and he explains that he consumed another monster along with the mermaid flesh, nullifying its effect. However, when Kotoko asks about the identity of the second monster, Kuro-kun becomes evasive, preferring not to disclose that information, as he needs to head to his scheduled visit. Undeterred, Kotoko insists that she wants to visit the mountain that evening to see the great giant serpent that has sent a message to her. Kuro-kun is hesitant, given what happened the last time they encountered danger, but he decides to stay home and enjoy the soup he made. While on her way to the mountain, Kotoko is annoyed that Kuro-kun let her go alone, despite her request for company. At the mountain, the giant serpent reveals itself, and she is thrilled. The serpent warmly welcomes her and invites her to sit. Before explaining the reason for her anger, she recounts her visit to Kuro-kun's home, where he gave her a cardigan and sprayed her with bug repellent to continue her journey without his company. Little does she know, he is secretly present, holding one of her yokai. The serpent seeks Kotoko's insight on certain aspects of the human world that it struggles to understand. He acknowledges his lack of hospitality, but is more concerned about Kotoko's boyfriend, Kuro-kun, choosing not to join her on the mountain. As the serpent expresses its concerns, it reveals that humans no longer worship him, which he doesn't particularly mind. However, he has become troubled by an incident a few weeks ago when a young girl brought a corpse to his river and threw it in. Intrigued by the serpent's question, Kotoko recalls the murder incident that took place that day involving a man named Yashihara Hiru, whose body was found with no identification. The police quickly identified the suspect as Tanyo, a 30-year-old woman who had confessed that she had killed Hiru and discarded his body in the river, but fails to provide convincing evidence to support her actions. Kotoko suspects that Tanyo threw the body in the swamp to hide it, but the giant serpent questions why she said she hoped the body to be found after disposing of the body. Kotoko then reveals that the woman informed the police that she brought the body to the swamp for the giant serpent to eat. However, the serpent remains unconvinced and wants to understand the true motivation behind Tanyo's words. Kotoko then delves into a story that happened 5 years ago, when Tanyo's boyfriend and his co-worker were found dead, seemingly in a double suicide due to embezzled funds. 5 years later, a colleague of her boyfriend's confessed to being the real culprit behind the deaths, claiming to have embezzled the funds and staged the suicides. Kotoko deduces that the brother of her boyfriend was likely present during the incident and is the actual suspect. She explains possible scenarios that could have led Tanyo to utter the words the giant serpent heard. During this discussion, Kotoko spots Kuro-kun hiding behind a tree, surprised that he decided to come after all. Kuro-kun is offended that she introduced him to the giant serpent as her boyfriend. Nonetheless, the giant serpent reiterates its interest in knowing the true reason behind Tanyo's actions. In response to his inquiry, Kotoko responded that she must have thrown something into the marsh before killing the man, and that she wanted the authorities to assist her in locating it after they had recovered the body. The enormous serpent confronts her once more, and inquires as to the nature of the object that she was seen previously hurling into the marsh. Kotoko comes to the conclusion that it must be something associated with her previous partner, possibly even a child that she carried but had to give up after it was revealed that he had cheated on her. This explanation seems acceptable to the enormous serpent, so it doesn't pursue the matter any further. On the way back to their house, Kuro-kun inquires of Kotoko of the veracity of the tale concerning the deceased infant. She freely acknowledges that she does not possess any hard evidence, and that she was only attempting to infer a convincing response because the enormous serpent requested that she find one. 2 years later, in a different section of the city, a schoolboy has an experience with an apparition that lacks a face and then drives his automobile under a bridge, causing it to crash into the water close to the police station. Saki-san, who was formerly involved with Kuro-kun, and Terada-san, who works with her, talk about the accident that occurred on the bridge. The victim blamed the incident on the fact that he had seen a faceless woman holding a steel beam in her hands, which he claimed had startled him and led to the disaster. Later on, he recanted his original testimony and said that he had, in fact, seen a dog. Terada-san is unsure which story to accept, but he thinks that the police should take rumors seriously, especially considering the recent stories of Steel Lady, an idol who allegedly died from being hit by steel beams. Terada-san is unsure which version to believe, but he suggests that the police take rumors seriously. Despite the fact that Terada-san does not believe in ghosts or other supernatural phenomena, he believes it is important for the police to investigate the situation thoroughly. On the other hand, Saki-san is terrified of the possibility that the rumors are accurate and that there are supernatural beings in the world. She thinks back to the event that led to the end of her relationship with Kuro-kun, which involved a monster. While driving home, Saki-san mulls about the monster problem and how her ignorance on the subject influenced a previous commitment she had with someone for a long period of time. Suddenly, as she is walking, she becomes aware of the presence of a being, and much to her amazement, a young girl tumbles into her arms, causing her to fall herself. The identity of the girl is revealed to be Kotoko, who was engaged in combat with Steel Lady at the time. In an effort to shake up her typical strategy for dealing with supernatural foes like ghosts and monsters, Saki-san rushes forward and attacks the ghost. However, she comes to the realization that the ghost may damage her, but she cannot harm the ghost. Kotoko manages to save Saki-san from being injured by the steel beam just in time by delivering a powerful blow to the Steel Lady and making it vanish in the process. Saki-san is grateful to the ghost for sparing her life, but she does not understand why she was unable to touch it. Kotoko admonishes her to flee the area as quickly as possible and warns her that the ghost is harmful. In reaction, Saki-san divulges her true identity to Kotoko as a member of the police force by displaying her badge. Kotoko is taken aback when she realizes that Saki-san is Kuro-kun's ex-girlfriend. She then proceeds to present herself as Kuro-kun's current girlfriend, startling Saki-san in the process. Saki-san thinks it's odd that Kuro-kun would date someone so much younger than him, like her. Kotoko is brought to Saki-san's flat, where she is treated, and Saki-san inquires about Kuro-kun's condition while she is there. In addition to this, she informs Kotoko about the issue with the Steel Lady and proposes finding a solution as soon as possible. Kotoko is in agreement, and she adds that many monsters have come to her for assistance in resolving difficulties that are very similar. Given that monsters are afraid of him, Saki-san is perplexed as to why Kuro-kun isn't there to protect her. She responds in a nonchalant manner, "There's no need to invite him since I didn't plan to stay out long," while simultaneously displaying a text message from Kuro-kun in which he states that something came up and she shouldn't look for him. She says this as if it were nothing. Saki-san's conviction that Kotoko lied to her about dating Kuro-kun is strengthened by the evidence presented here. Kotoko, on the other hand, reassures Saki-san that Kuro-kun is safe and that no reasonable monster would attempt to harm him. The Steel Lady's true identity, Nanase Karen, is exposed when she exits the flat where she was hiding. In the later hours of that day, Saki-san delves through the investigation files to determine the real reason why Nanase Karen passed away. She investigates Nanase's life as an idol, delving into the conflicts and rumors that dogged her and drove her to move hotels frequently in order to evade the paparazzi. The following day, Saki-san discusses this knowledge with Terada-san, who speculates that Nanase Karen's vengeful soul may be seeking retribution on society for the way it treated her. Terada-san believes that Nanase Karen passed away as a result of the treatment she received from society. He makes the remark that there may be more to the story than initially appears, and then he hands her the investigation files on the Nanase case while expecting a summary from her after she has completed reading them. During this time, Kotoko is also looking into the case of Nanase Karen, who has turned out to be a malicious ghost. She is attempting to determine what caused her to take this path. After conducting an internet search, she came to the conclusion that the authorities might have more pertinent information. Kotoko is frustrated by the possibility that she will need to seek assistance from Saki-san, despite the fact that they had previously agreed to have nothing further to do with one another, and so she is searching her room for additional hints. While this is going on, Saki-san is continuing her inquiry and getting closer to determining the real reason why Nanase Karen passed away. She is startled when she hears a knock on her window and looks out to see two youkai, ghosts, flying outside. She collapses on her bed, terrified, only to discover that Kotoko has sent a message to her, which was brought to her by the yokai, begging for her assistance with the Steel Lady situation. If she does not accept to help, Kotoko will continue to confront her every night with a yokai. In addition, the message specifies a place where Kotoko can be found. When Kotoko arrives at the indicated location, she is in the middle of eating when she is informed by a helpful monster that the Steel Lady has appeared. She quickly arrives at the site and gives the monster instructions on how to communicate the news to Saki-san. Upon arriving, she sees the Steel Lady battling a human, and after giving it some more thought, she realizes that the human in question is none other than Kuro-kun, the object of her long-standing crush, who she also believes to be her lover. Kotoko wonders why Kuro-kun is there, so she hides in a corner and observes the fight between him and the Steel Lady Nanase. Shortly after, Saki-san arrives at the scene, angry that Kotoko asked a monster to summon her and led her to the wrong place. However, her anger subsides as she witnesses the fight between the Steel Lady and a human. She initially doesn't recognize the human but wants to help him, only to be stopped by Kotoko. After a closer look, Saki-san realizes that the human is her ex-boyfriend Kuro-kun. Saki-san becomes worried that the Steel Lady might harm Kuro-kun, but Kotoko reassures her that Kuro-kun is immortal due to having eaten mermaid flesh. The fight continues, and Kuro-kun appears to fall on the ground. The Steel Lady takes the opportunity to smash his head with her steel beam, seemingly killing him. Saki-san panics upon witnessing Kuro-kun's death, but to her surprise, he comes back to life almost immediately, unfazed by the attack. He then confronts the Steel Lady, grabbing her by the neck with ease. This move surprises Saki-san, but Kotoko knows of Kuro-kun's family history. Over 10 generations before Kuro-kun, the head of the family at the time had a strong desire to find a way for his lineage to predict the future. In that era, consuming the flesh of any youkai would grant the strengths possessed by that particular yokai while they were alive. The yokai who had the ability to predict the future was a kudan. However, there was a significant drawback to this power. The act of predicting the future would lead to immediate death for the kudan. Unfazed by this fatal consequence, the head of the family proceeded with the experiment, involving himself and his household. Tragically, most of them lost their lives while attempting to predict the future. The few who survived ultimately met their demise after successfully foretelling the future once. After many decades, the family discovered the power associated with consuming mermaid flesh. This revelation sparked another round of experiments, during which Kuro-kun's grandmother offered both kudan and mermaid flesh to Kuro-kun and several other children to eat. Surprisingly, Kuro-kun was the only one who survived, making him the first successful test subject. From that point on, his grandmother subjected him to various forms of harm and attempted to kill him to test his newfound abilities, ultimately making him immune to pain in the process. After the fight, the three of them meet up and head back to Saki-san's apartment. Kuro-kun reveals that he fought the Steel Lady because the monsters sought his help. Despite their initial fear of him, the monsters grew fond of him after seeing him with Kotoko. Kotoko explains that the Steel Lady is a monster of imagination, formed by the frenzy of rumors spread on the internet. Kotoko further adds that in their world, monsters of imagination are created through rumors and people's collective beliefs. When someone imagines or spreads a story about a specific monster, it gains strength and form as the rumors circulate. They eventually give the monster a name, and that's when it materializes and begins to roam. Usually, monsters of imagination are not very powerful, and they tend to disappear quickly. However, Steel Lady Nanase is an exception. Despite only a year passing since Nanase Karen's death, the rumors have created a formidable and unusually strong monster. Kotoko attributes the widespread rumors to the power of the internet, which has facilitated the rapid spread of information. She reminds Saki about the internet page featuring Nana's Karen and how the ghost's appearance matches the picture from that page. She clarifies that the reason the ghost looks like Nanase is not because the person who drew the picture had seen her before, but because the ghost took on the appearance based on the image and the web page itself. According to her theory, the Steel Lady has no will of her own, but moves based on people's collective imagination, making her different from other yokai and ghosts. Still in the apartment, Kotoko elaborates on her theory, explaining that the Steel Lady's existence is fueled by people's desires and beliefs about her being a real ghost. As unbelievable as it may sound, Saki-san finds truth in Kotoko's explanation. Saki realizes that it will be challenging to defeat such a ghost and wonders if they should shut down the webpage. However, Kotoko explains that it's not possible and she has devised another plan. When Kuro-kun hears Kotoko's strategy to defeat the Steel Lady, he reacts with skepticism, which is only natural. It seems unlikely to him that they will be able to vanquish a monster that they have conjured up themselves, just as she has done. Kotoko openly asserts that the answer lies in the construction of an engaging story that is powerful enough to conquer the imaginations and beliefs of other people, and that this is the only way to solve the problem. She is under the assumption that if they build a new storyline, they would be able to convince people that the Steel Lady is no longer essential. This is something that she is not entirely sure of. Kotoko goes to Saki-san for help in acquiring reliable information on Nanase Karen, whose identity as the Steel Lady was only discovered after she had passed away. Kotoko wants to be able to fulfill this goal, so she goes to Saki-san for aid. In the end, Kotoko is successful in convincing Saki-san to provide the information regarding Nanase Karen's files that Terada-san had provided. This information was offered by Terada-san. In the beginning, Saki-san is reluctant to share the knowledge with Kotoko. Saki accepts that her coworker is interested in the Nanase case, and then she proceeds to tell how everything got started with the complaint that Nanase Karen made. She describes the sequence of events that led up to Nanase's passing, as well as the investigation that was carried out to ascertain the manner in which she died, and whether or not it was the result of a murder or an accident. The official explanation for Nanase's death is that he committed suicide. But as Kotoko and Saki-san explore the circumstances surrounding Nanase's death, they begin to have concerns about this explanation. The official explanation claims that Nanase committed suicide. They find it weird that Nanase did not attempt to defend herself when the steel beams came crashing down on her face, and they are surprised that she did not attempt to do so. Kotoko, who is set on taking the matter further, leads them to the area where Nanase was slain and summons out a ghost who was there at the building site at the time of Nanase's demise. When the ghost appears, Kotoko asks the ghost what happened to Nanase. Kotoko and Saki-san are mystified as a result of the fact that the statement made by the ghost is in agreement with the records kept by the police. They are at a loss for a solution, and Kuro-kun notes that Kotoko is becoming increasingly concerned about how they will prevail against the Steel Lady, despite the fact that they are at a loss for a solution. He asks her whether or not she is capable of devising a plan, and she responds that she is open to a lot of ideas but is unsure which one will be successful. He then asks her whether or not she is able to formulate a strategy. She wonders if Kuro-kun can use his ability to glimpse into the future and identify which approach will have the best chance of being successful. The revelation made by Kuro-kun that his powers do not extend so far into the future is a disheartening turn of events. In spite of this limitation, Kuro-kun offers Kotoko his unwavering support and frequently highlights the fact that he is willing to make sacrifices for Kotoko's sake. He warns her to be exceedingly careful in whatever she does, since the danger they are facing right now is of the highest possible severity. Kotoko fervently wishes and prays that Nanase would not kill anyone, as this would make it significantly more challenging for other people to comprehend and enjoy the logical fiction she writes. Unfortuitously, Terada-san makes the decision to handle the problem on his own and sets off in search of the Steel Lady in order to do so. He is unaware that she is a ghost and cannot be touched, so he makes an attempt to capture her even though it is impossible for him to do so. As soon as he realizes this over the course of the confrontation, when he attempts to strike her, he is left defenseless in the face of her assault because he is unable to hit her. Terada-san is put to death when the Steel Lady strikes him with her steel beam. As a consequence of Terada-san's passing, shockwaves are sent all over the internet. Saki-san is inconsolable over the passing of Terada-san, and she blames herself for his death due to the fact that she did not provide adequate warning to Terada-san about the Steel Lady. Due to the fact that he messaged her the final time before he passed away, the authorities have decided to concentrate their investigation on her. Saki-san comes to the realization that in order to defeat the Steel Lady, they will need to collaborate with Kotoko in order to design a strategy, as the police will be unable to handle the issue, and as a result, she chooses to accompany Kotoko to her room in order to facilitate this collaboration. They analyze the most recent internet comments about the Steel Lady in Kotoko's room and find that many people are already attributing Terada-san's death to her, despite the fact that there is no actual proof linking the two events. This is something that they find out after reviewing the most current internet comments about the Steel Lady. They discuss the string of murders that have been related to the Steel Lady, but Kuro-kun seems more concerned with Nanase's physical qualities, which frustrates Kotoko. The deaths have been linked to the Steel Lady. They are, on the other hand, able to gather their thoughts and move forward with the investigation of the case. Saki-san appears not long after that, looking for verification that the Steel Lady was, in fact, the person who was to blame for Terada-san's passing away. Kotoko asserts that this is accurate due to the fact that he received verification of its veracity from a spirit that was present during the incident. They have reached the realization that the Steel Lady actually carrying out a murder is a more significant obstacle than they had originally considered it to be when they began investigating the matter. Kotoko is concerned that the Steel Lady will acquire greater power as more people think about her and talk about her, and that this will result in more people falling prey to her. Because of this, it will be more challenging for Kotoko to triumph against her. Kotoko is troubled, and in order to counteract the reports that are spreading about Nanase, she is seeking to find out how to develop a coherent fiction in order to combat the rumors. Her ability to put her plan into action has become more difficult as a result of the most recent murder. Kuro-kun suggests that a variety of fictions be written in order to disperse the thoughts of the general public and lessen the impact that Nanase has. Kotoko experiences a moment of complete and utter panic, but in that moment, they come up with 4 different tactics to defeat the Steel Lady, and they are convinced that they will be able to put those strategies into action later on the very same night. The level of dedication that she demonstrates astounds Kuro-kun, and the two of them waste no time in getting to work on the preparations for their plan. Kotoko eventually succumbs to exhaustion from all of the serious contemplation she has been doing, and she falls asleep as a result. This paves the way for Kuro-kun and Saki-san to talk about their former connection with one another and gives them with the opportunity to do so. The subject of Kuro-kun's cousin, Rika-san, who has been a patient at the university hospital for the past 3 years, comes up next in the talk. Saki-san and Kuro-kun begin discussing Rika-san in their conversation. Saki-san considers Rika-san to be the most stunning lady alive, and he freely confesses that if he were to start a relationship with anyone, it would be with her. They make the decision to go see Rika-san in the hospital because they are interested in learning more about her. When they get there, Saki-san is taken aback by Rika-san's attractiveness, which causes a small pain of bitterness to build up in her chest. They do this because they are curious about Rika-san. In the midst of a tense situation, Saki-san relates the story of her initial meeting with Rika-san, Kuro-kun's cousin. Saki-san experiences a moment of terror when she realizes that Rika-san may have been Kuro-kun's first love. This prompts her to remove herself from the situation as quickly as possible. She overhears 2 women in the cafe talking about Rika-san's operation after she tried suicide, which leads Saki-san to fear that Rika-san has passed away as a result of her injuries. Kuro-kun, on the other hand, discloses that Rika-san is still alive and that she possesses the same immortality as he does. Because of the news that Rika-san is immortal, Saki-san and Kuro-kun find themselves in an unpleasant situation with one another. In the meantime, Kotoko, who has just woken up, is aware of the tension in the room and wonders what took place while she was asleep. Kotoko is offered a ride home by Saki-san after Kuro-kun makes the suggestion to go. Later on, when they are in the car, Kotoko makes an attempt to question about the circumstances surrounding Saki-san and Kuro-kun. However, Saki-san changes the subject and asks Kotoko if she has ever met Rika-san, who is Kuro-kun's cousin. Kotoko confirms and discusses her encounter with Rika-san, telling how Rika-san initially thought Kotoko was unfit for Kuro-kun, but subsequently developed close to her. Kotoko also relates her own personal experience with Rika-san. Kotoko relates how Rika-san was ultimately ordered to leave the hospital, which is what prompted her to seek the assistance of Kuro-kun. She gathered her belongings and then approached Kuro-kun with the request to move in with him because she had nowhere else to go. The request threw Kuro-kun for a loop, so he immediately reached out to Kotoko for assistance. In her role as the goddess of wisdom, Kotoko recognized an opportunity to obtain what she desired from him and requested the house key in exchange for his cousin being allowed to stay at his home. Kuro-kun finally gave up and reluctantly agreed to hand over the key to Kotoko. Later on, Rika-san makes the decision to leave Kuro-kun's apartment, stating that she has found a new job as well as a new place to live. This event takes place around the same time that Kuro-kun had been following Rika-san for a week prior to his return to battle the Steel Lady. It comes as a complete surprise when Kotoko discloses that Rika-san was the one who designed the Steel Lady, as the image that has been circulating on the internet is identical to Rika-san's design. Steel Lady is the product of Rika-san's obsessive desire to exercise complete command over her own life and unfolding events. Kotoko is informed by the specter of a cat that the Steel Lady has appeared in another place by the arrival of the cat's spirit. Kotoko is adamant that Saki-san should travel there in order to pick up Kuro-kun, and she urges Saki-san to do so. As soon as they arrive, Kuro-kun engages the Steel Lady in combat, and Kotoko immediately begins her own war against the lies that are spread on the internet and which contribute to the existence of the Steel Lady. Kotoko is adamant in her pursuit to beat the Steel Lady and undo Rika-san's nefarious actions, and she plans to do so by countering the lies with lies that are even more convincing. Kotoko stays in the car with Saki-san and continues to devise a plan in order to construct an enticing story that refutes Rika-san's assertions. She divulges the information that she is preparing for 4 separate debates in order to persuade people that Nanase does not exist. They engage in a simulated legislative battle in the virtual world of the internet, where both Kotoko and Rika have an equal amount of strength and capability. The objective is to persuade the audience and change their worldview in some way. It is brought to Kotoko's attention by Saki-san that Rika-san has the ability to delete her comments. However, Kotoko explains that doing so would damage Rika-san's credibility. Instead, Rika-san will attempt to discredit Kotoko's arguments by publishing them in anonymous pages. However, Kotoko is prepared to counter this strategy. Kotoko lays the groundwork for her scheme by first claiming that the story of the Steel Lady is nothing more than a myth and reiterating the point that no one has ever actually laid eyes on the Steel Lady in real life. She contends that the evidence that has been found by people is nothing more than hints and not robust evidence that the entity does in fact exist. Kotoko is led to believe that the Steel Lady is a scapegoat for intentional wrongdoings that are being committed by a third party who he believes to be responsible. She continues by stating that, in her opinion, ghosts do not exist, which piques the audience's interest despite the fact that she has already established her position. Some people are beginning to lose interest in the situation and are wondering who or what is responsible for the disturbances that have been going on for such a long time. Kotoko is brought into the conversation by a member of the audience who asks her to elaborate on her theory. Kotoko presents the case of Terada-san, a detective who was brutally murdered and whose death was attributed to the Steel Lady in order to provide evidence in support of her claim. She contends that the perpetrator of the crime was likely aware that Terada-san, a skilled and competent detective, would have a difficult time believing that people were being terrorized by a ghost. She discusses a number of scenarios that could have played out during the Terada-san incident, including the possibility that someone may have invented the Steel Lady myth for the sole purpose of having the detective be murdered. However, the public is not persuaded by the rational explanations she provides. Kotoko is undeterred and continues to delve deeper into her theory, which suggests that the murderer, knowing the detective's ability to conduct investigations, devised a plan to coax him out of hiding. The plan consisted of making a panicked phone call from a person who claimed to have seen the Steel Lady in one of the nearby cities. The detective would respond to the call, which would then direct him to an area that had previously been selected and where a trap had been set. The remote control activated the stone and pendulum that were both part of the trap. The culprit, who was aware of Terada-san's height, had hung a pendulum from a hook and placed it around the petrol station in such a way that it would fall and hit Terada-san on the head when the detective arrived. As soon as Terada-san arrived, the murderer displayed Nanasi's hairband for him and beckoned him to come to the location that had been marked. Terada-san's arrival caused the culprit to let go of the hook, which caused the pendulum to fall and hit Terada-san on the head, giving the impression that he was being attacked by the Steel Lady. People still had trouble believing that someone would go to such great lengths to kill the detective, regardless of how complex the explanation was. They found it hard to believe that anyone would do such a thing. According to Kotoko's account, Terada-san's killer must be someone less capable than Terada himself, but someone who was close enough to him to be familiar with his work ethic and height. She suggests that it could be a female coworker, and that the motivation could be something like the coworker feeling threatened by Terada-san or disturbed by her. This explanation convinces a lot of people, but later on, Saki-san finds out that the narrative paints her as the one who committed the crime. She confides in Kotoko her worries, and he assuages her fears by assuring her that the solution won't hold for very long. Within a matter of seconds, they become aware that the opinions of the people around them are swiftly shifting, and they no longer believe Kotoko's explanation. Kotoko explains to Saki-san that Rika-san possesses the same power as Kuro-kun, and is also seeking a favorable future for herself, just as Kuro-kun is doing for them. Kotoko also tells Saki-san that Rika-san is looking out for herself in the same way that Kuro-kun is looking out for them. She explains to Saki-san that she is considering 4 distinct justifications, and the first justification that she provided was crafted with the intention of persuading a particular group of individuals. Now, she intends to present the other 3 explanations, one after the other, in the hopes of influencing a larger audience and discrediting the belief that Nanase is a ghost. In the meantime, Kuro-kun is still defending himself against the relentless assault of the Steel Lady. Kotoko, who was motivated by her resolve to change the perceptions of the general public and dispel the legend of the Steel Lady. She makes the decision to proceed with her second explanation, which she then puts down on her phone for Saki-san to read. The interpretation, on the other hand, which asserts that Nanase is actually a ghost out for vengeance, sounds completely illogical. Kotoko is questioned by Saki-san about this strategy, and Saki-san is aware that their objective is to demonstrate that Nanase does not exist. Kotoko explains that because their first idea was incorrect, the most effective strategy she can employ is to write a story in which Nanase is a real person. By doing so, she is able to persuade the readers of Nanasi's real purpose for returning and evoke pity, both of which help to reduce the impression that she is malicious. The crowd is talking amongst themselves, and some of them are speculating that the fact that Nanasi passed away may have been an important factor in her spectral appearance. Kotoko challenges the widely held notion that Nanase took her own life because she felt responsible for the death of her father. Instead, she discloses that Nanasi's demise was brought on by the immense grief and suspicion that surrounded the passing of her father. Kotoko maintains that Nanase did not return as the Steel Lady out of a desire for vengeance, but rather to challenge the general public's understanding of how her father passed away. When Nanasi's preliminary efforts were unsuccessful, she resorted to more extreme methods. For the purpose of bolstering her case, Kotoko argues that if Nanase were motivated by vengeance, she would have already taken the life of the police officer who was looking into the death of her father. Kotoko, on the other hand, posits the possibility that Nanase's father may have purposefully planned his own death in order to implicate his daughter and safeguard his reputation. He left a note that seemed to point the finger at Nanase's complicity in his death, but Nanase, not wanting to damage her reputation any further, got rid of the evidence that may have implicated her. Her premature death was the result of a sad accident involving steel beams, yet it was tragically mistaken as being a suicide. Kotoko hypothesizes that once Nanase passed away, her spirit may have reconnected with her father's, and he may have confessed his misdeeds, thereby becoming the driving force behind Nanase's spectral transformation into the Steel Lady. This is another intriguing scenario. Kotoko's speculation is based on the fact that Nanase's father may have confessed his actions. Even though some people start to believe Kotoko's explanations, others continue to be skeptical, which leads to a lessening of the spectral power that the Steel Lady has. The tide begins to swing in favor of Kuro-kun as he takes the upper hand against the renowned ghost as the conflict between Kuro-kun and the Steel Lady unfolds. As the battle progresses, the tide begins to turn in favor of Kuro-kun. Kotoko moves on to her third solution, which involves raising the notion that Nanase was not the person who passed away in the accident. She does this despite the fact that the struggle is still going on. The person had suffered such severe facial damage that it was impossible to determine their identity. However, before Kotoko could go further into her theory, Rika-san interjected, expressing skepticism and presenting counter-arguments to Kotoko's hypothesis. Kotoko was unable to continue because of Rika-san's interruption. In spite of Kotoko's unrelenting efforts, the public's perception of the real story behind the Steel Lady has not changed much. The mysterious presence of the urban legend continues to grab people's imaginations, which fuels the never-ending struggle to discover the truth about Nanase Karen and the Steel Lady. As the climactic battle between Kotoko and Rika-san reaches its peak, Kotoko finds herself at a disadvantage. The contest has evolved into a popularity struggle, with both sides vying for the public's favor. Kotoko realizes that she must change her approach if she is to outmaneuver Rika-san and protect her mission. In a bold move, Kotoko decides to unleash her final blow. She reveals a shocking revelation to the public, the true identity of the person behind the Steel Lady and the murder of the detective. She confidently asserts that Nanase Karen is not dead but alive, having orchestrated her own death to escape from the past and start anew. To support her claim, Kotoko explains that Nanase had befriended a look-alike of her age, whom she later used as a decoy. On that fateful night, she killed the decoy and destroyed the face beyond recognition, all in a bid to fake her own death convincingly. Nanase assumed the identity of the faceless corpse, tricking the public into believing the existence of the vengeful Steel Lady ghost. The revelation leaves the public puzzled, and they begin to question the truth behind the Steel Lady. The focus shifts from the ghostly legend to the mystery surrounding Nanase's fate. People grow curious and eager to uncover whether Nanase is truly alive or deceased. As the public's interest wanes in the Steel Lady, the ghost's power weakens. The people start forming their own theories based on the information Kotoko had presented. They connect the dots and begin to understand the interconnectedness of Kotoko's various conclusions. On the other hand, Rika-san realizes that her plan is crumbling, and she can do little to stop it. She regrets not being able to turn back time and prevent the revelation of her lies. Kotoko's strategic brilliance has outmaneuvered her, and she can sense that the end is near. In a final act of bravery, Kotoko makes her last move. She confesses that Nanase herself created the website spreading the rumors and was, in fact, the website's administrator. Nanase had been the one defending all the false information to conceal the truth. As the public loses interest in the Steel Lady and becomes consumed with the mystery surrounding Nanase, the ghost weakens further. The the opportunity for Kuro-kun to put an end to the Steel Lady once and for all presents itself. In a breathtaking display of his power, Kuro-kun unleashes his signature beam and finally defeats the Steel Lady formed from a web of lies. Kadoko is overjoyed that the fabricated Steel Lady has been vanquished with the same deception that brought her into existence. The battle ends, and the truth prevails. As the thrilling saga of Spectre reaches its climax, the dust settles after the intense battle with the Steel Lady. Rika-san, fully aware that her sinister plot has crumbled, takes a final decisive step to end the chaos she had created. She bravely sends an email to Kuro-kun, deleting the infamous Steel Lady website once and for all. The police continue their investigations to find Nanase Karen, fully acknowledging that the ghostly threat has been vanquished. In the aftermath of victory, the creatures of the supernatural realm, monsters and yokai, emerge from the shadows to celebrate alongside Kotoko. However, the celebration is interrupted when Kuro-kun arrives. Later, in the car, exhaustion finally takes over Kotoko, and she drifts into a deep slumber. This momentary respite allows Saki-san and Kuro-kun to engage in a heart-to-heart conversation. The next day, Saki-san resumes her duties at the police department, where the investigation into Nanase Karen is still ongoing. She holds the secret, the truth behind Nanase's demise, and the spectral enigma of the Steel Lady. However, sharing her insights with her colleagues seems futile, as no one would believe her otherworldly revelations. Still, with the public debate on whether Nanase is a ghost or still alive, the case remains open-ended, with no conclusive evidence. Some people continue investigating the situation, considering the possibility that Nanase might still be alive, and the police reopen the file of her death. However, the conversation becomes more secretive and hushed, with no public consensus reached. Life returns to normal for everyone. Later that night, Kuro-kun heads out for dinner, only to be met unexpectedly by Saki-san. In their candid exchange, he discloses the reason for keeping Kotoko's existence a secret from Rika-san. Fearing that Rika-san would endanger Kotoko, he aims to protect her from any potential harm. Finally, the moment arises when Kuro-kun and Saki-san find time to explore their complex relationship. Saki-san expresses her willingness to be near Kuro-kun, cherishing their moments together, yet the boundary of touch remains an emotional hurdle for her. Moving forward, Kuro-kun takes Saki-san home, gifting her with a bicycle that Kotoko had intended to present. The gesture symbolizes a newfound bond and appreciation between them. The following morning, Kotoko awakens, astonished to have slept for an extended period. Realizing she may have given Kuro-kun and Saki-san too much time alone, she grapples with feelings of jealousy, but eventually overcomes it. In her haste, she heads to take a shower, only to be startled by Kuro-kun's unexpected appearance in her room. The two engage in a heartfelt conversation before preparing to check out of the hotel. Their next destination leads them to Kotoko's residence, where Kuro-kun, initially hesitant, agrees to accompany her. Holding his hands tightly, Kotoko displays her love and gratitude for his unwavering support, cherishing every moment they share. As they continue walking, the rain starts, and Kotoko remarks that despite the existence of various yokai, ayakashi, monsters, demons, and other creatures in the world, there is still a need for order. No matter what Rika does, she will ensure order is maintained in the world. The question remains, as the journey draws to a close, will Rika-san's sinister plans succeed in making Kuro-kun mortal, or will Kotoko's ingenuity and love prove to be the ultimate shield against the forces of darkness? Brace yourself for the stunning conclusion of Spectre, where the intertwining worlds of the supernatural and human collide in an epic tale of mystery, love, and the pursuit of truth.